What makes a game worth your time? Sometimes it's a fresh idea. Sometimes it's a bold twist on a familiar style. With Wuchang Fallen Feathers, the question isn't whether it can copy what came before, but whether it can stand on its own. I'm Vadd, and my review here will break down what works, what doesn't, and whether Wuchang is worth your time. Wuchang Fallen Feathers fits right into the continued downpour of Souls-like releases. It's a debut title that offers familiar stamina-based combat. Wuchang hooked me at the start with its combat, world, and the skill tree. Over time, Wuchang started to stumble with some uneven bosses, some overused gotcha moments, and a story that can't quite hold its weight. At its core, Wuchang uses the same stamina-managed expected from a Souls-like. Every swing, every dodge, every block, it's gonna matter. The twist comes here in Wuchang from its weapon and discipline system. You can bind a discipline to a weapon, and this gives you a new, distinct feel to your combat. The combat animations can be weighty. Each weapon feels different. The big axes lock you into some commitment, while the lighter blades reward your positioning. The stamina economy helps make every choice carry some weight. In addition, Wuchang has a Skyborn Might system. This is a resource bar you build through combat. You can spend it on a heavy special attack, or maybe save it for a defensive option. I think this creates a nice layer of strategy. Do you go aggressive or hold back in case you need your special move in a defensive position? Some enemies apply status effects that deal damage over time, and managing those status effects alongside your stamina adds more decision making than you might expect. And frankly, when it clicks and the flow of fights at times will feel intense and satisfying. One thing I think Wuchang really nails is accessibility within experimentation. If you don't like the build you've chosen, the game makes it easy to respect. That freedom of experimenting kept me testing new approaches rather than locking into one style. And I like that. I actually felt the skill tree here was pretty massive. It's a big grid style layout branching into multiple different paths. You can chase damage, you can focus on survivability, or unlock unique combat techniques, those disciplines. It's not just numbers going up. Some nodes will change the way your abilities work, and it makes your build feel a little personal. I think that kind of depth gives Wuchang more replay value than some of its peers. Progression also ties into your gear. Weapons have upgrade routes, and tying them with different disciplines means you can specialize in how you want to fight in kind of unusual ways. This sense of freedom makes experimentation rewarding, especially since respecs aren't punishing. You're almost encouraged to try something new rather than grinding endlessly to fix a mistake in your build. Skill progression is only as good as the enemies and bosses that test you. The regular enemies in Wuchang are industry standard. Each region will introduce a new type, and you adjust accordingly. Attack patterns are readable, but punishing if ignored, striking a nice balance. I found Wuchang used surprise traps as a crutch, leaning heavily on these blind ambushes. Mimic-style encounters with sudden ambushes happen so often that for me, they lost their punch. Early on, they're fun, and they change up the pace, but over time, they sour and become empty filler. If everything's an ambush, nothing's an ambush. Boss fights are where Wuchang shows both its ambition and its flaws. Some bosses are tense and well designed. They're pushing you to master patterns, while others drag on far too long. Wuchang's bosses feel like difficulty by attrition rather than design. While variety does exist, you have monstrous beasts, skilled warriors, corrupted creatures, the balance between thrilling and frustrating is not consistent. Some of the optional side bosses have dedicated intro cutscenes, they have lore building around them, unique moves, and other main story mandatory fights have none of that. Several bosses all reuse the same exact move. Yes, with a different skin, different color, different animation, but I was shocked by how many of the bosses all had a hyper beam attack. They just shot a laser at you all the time. I think a few less encounters to keep a more diverse pool of bosses would have gone a long way to hiding this shortcoming. Wuchang has a clear pacing issue. A number of the bosses have a full second phase, and they don't really feel like they earn them. You should expect long runbacks and questionable hitboxes. The later into Wuchang you get, the longer the boss combos will be. On a routine basis, you'll be dodging somewhere between 0 and 10 times before it's your turn to attack. Still, when bosses do land, they hit hard, and learning the patterns and landing that final blow delivers the rush that this genre is known for. I think Wuchang's combat carries the experience, but story and lore matter as well. The setup here is strong. We've got a world plagued by this memory disease. People are transforming into feathered horrors. It's a really good hook, I think. Early cutscenes establish a mood and set up stakes very effectively. over the long run, the narrative loses clarity. You'll meet characters who vanish for hours, plot points completely fizzle out, and key narrative beats are completely buried in item texts. Yes, the voice acting and presentation helps quite a bit, but it can't fix the structural issues. If you are the type of gamer who enjoys piecing together cryptic lore, Wuchang has material for you. But if you're more interested in a clear through line, it's gonna feel really underwhelming. I think the themes of memory and decay and transformation do fit well with the gameplay loop here of the genre. You die, you respawn. You die, you respawn. There's a rebirth in that. And I think the story complements the mechanics, even if it doesn't always land as a narrative. Where the story falters, the world itself tries to pick up the slack. On a technical side, I think Wuchang visuals fall short of today's standards. Even on max settings with top-end hardware, the presentation looks below average compared with its peers. Textures often appear flat, character models lack fine details, and the environment reuses assets frequently. Yes, the lighting effects do set atmosphere at time, but they rarely impress. Enemy design shows real effort, especially in the larger bosses, but the overall fidelity drags them down. Animations can be stiff and transitions awkward, and I think this undercuts the otherwise weighty combat feel. Performance was stable, but stability alone doesn't make up for visuals that at launch look dated. Overall, Wuchang's graphics are serviceable, but well under industry standards. This makes presentation one of its weakest points. Wuchang's levels are all interconnected. They're full of dead ends, branching paths, and they heavily encourage backtracking. The level design isn't as tight as the best in the genre, but it's strong for a debut title. I often felt in Wuchang I was lost and not sure I was moving down a path that was making forward progress, and overall, I still found exploration pretty rewarding, if overly reliant on cave systems and ladders. I think atmosphere is a strength of Wuchang. The game starts bright and colorful, you're on a mountaintop, looking into a valley, and it starts to slide into these grim, horrific, icky, sticky spaces. I think that tonal shift is striking. You'll move through these sunlit courtyards into this twisted forest and these blood-stained caves. The atmosphere is a strong point here in Wuchang. The balance here between exploration and linear progression isn't perfect, but it works. Which brings us to a weak spot here for Wuchang, which is that balance and pacing. A lot of the early hours feel smooth, but difficulty spikes arrive suddenly. Sometimes regular enemies seem to hit harder than bosses, while other stretches feel way too forgiving. This uneven curve makes the challenge feel incredibly inconsistent. Boss pacing also affects the overall rhythm. Multi-phase fights start to pile up. These long health bars drag out encounters that don't always justify the time investment. Combined with frequent mimic-style traps, the flow of play can feel stop and go rather than a steady escalation. When that flow is right, the pacing feels natural and it's satisfying, and it's a reminder that this is a debut effort with strong ideas but room for polish. With pacing and balance in mind, I think it's worth asking how much originality Wuchang Fallen Feathers brings. And facts are, Wuchang's doesn't reinvent the genre. Wuchang's doesn't bring a fresh idea. The discipline systems give weapons personality, and the Skyborn Might adds a layer of choice beyond stamina management. The skill tree also stands out to me for its emphasis on progression flexibility. The tone, the level structure, and the boss design often echo all the peers around it. We've seen these before. The results here is that Wuchang feels like a strong student of the genre rather than a bold innovator. I think the replay value in Wuchang comes from New Game Plus and the flexible build system. Because these disciplines can change how weapons behave, it can be fun to experiment with different combinations across multiple runs. And the ease of respecs means you can test builds mid-run without restarting from scratch. For dedicated Souls-like fans who enjoy experimenting, Wuchang has enough depth to support more than one run. There's also a New Game Plus mode. At the time of recording, New Game Plus is deeply unbalanced as enemies do not appropriately scale. I think this will discourage veterans, removing a reason to return and push their builds further. Wuchang Fallen Feathers' pacing, overused tricks, and weak storytelling keep it from greatness. For dedicated fans of the genre who have cleared their backlog, I think Wuchang is worth your time. I think there's a high expectation that has been set with Wuchang at a full retail price, and I don't think it always meets them. The main campaign can take somewhere between 19 and 35 hours. It really depends on how much you explore, how much side stuff you do, and your skill level, how often you get stuck on things. The optional content and the New Game Plus can definitely extend that playtime further. For players who really enjoy experimenting with builds, that runtime I think offers a lot of value. But if you're more focused on strong clarity or cutting-edge visuals, the shortcomings dungeons really start to stand out more, especially when weighed against the price tag. When you think about value for money, it's not just about the hours. A short game priced lower can feel like a bargain if the quality is high and the experience is memorable. On the other hand, a long game at a premium price can feel disappointing if much of that time is filled with repetition or filler. Wuchang leads towards the latter. It offers plenty of hours, but the quality of those hours varies. Boss fights delivers sometimes. Regular encounters and exploration can feel stretched thin. This uneven quality and dated presentation make the asking price harder to justify in the current flood of Souls-likes. Wuchang struggles to find its own identity. I think for most of its long runtime, it repeats the same type of enemies and encounters. Regular fights often feel shallow. Spam attacks until something falls over. You're missing the tension of trading blows or looking for openings. Outside of bosses, combat rarely feels rewarding. The world design also drags the experience down. Many areas look familiar. There are just so many similar caves. You go through so many caves and ladders that, they get built from reused assets with paths and ladders that make navigation just confusing. Exploration often feels like pacing in circles rather than uncovering secrets. The visuals don't help either. With a flat attempt at a hyper-realistic style, it just lacks personality in some places. Boss fights show more effort, but because everything in between is often underwhelming, the highlights can get buried. Instead of standing out in a strong way, the boss fights underline how empty the journey can feel. A strong number of fights are gimmick fights with long runbacks, and I don't think that's fun. Wuchang Fallen Feathers is awarded a 2 out of 5. I do not recommend.